Hello and welcome into the Marriage Talk podcast. Good to have you with us. Bill Hobson here along with Jay and Laura Laffoon. You can find out more information on them at jayandlaura.com. And this week is a continuation of the prior week's conversation about parenting and marriage. And Jay and Laura, last week we really focused on parenting those kids that are 4 years and younger. As it turns out, kids tend to get a little older. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more adventurous, so they go off to school, they make friends, they want devices, they form opinions, they seek input into company policy, so to speak. So I don't know where you want to start this conversation, but let's go 5 years old and on and how it changes.
Bigger kids, bigger problems. When they're 4 and under, you're talking about diapers and
daycare. 5 years until they leave the house. Because then I think there's a whole nother episode about parenting adult children. I think that's a whole different. So.
But when they get into school, things change because there's other influences in their life, and they're not always great influences.
But you might be getting sleep now.
Yes, hopefully you're getting some sleep.
Might be.
Our kids, as the kids get into school, we were able to develop a routine, and that routine became very wonderful because we established the routine. And I think, again, we're going to come back to this. The best parenting advice we can give you is to get on the same page. Just a little precursor, University of Chicago, University of Minnesota, independent of each other, did studies on health of children. What are the key ingredients to raise happy, healthy, emotionally, physically, mentally sound kids, which I think everyone wants to do. And both of these universities came up with one answer, and that is a mom and dad who love each other. When mom and dad are unified and love each other and show that love in the home, the kids feel the most important thing in the world, secure. They feel secure. And I think that, especially as the kids venture out into the world and meet other kids and have other experiences outside of the home, for them to know that they're going to come home to a mom and dad who love each other is going to give them a security that allows them to flourish.
We were a funny story. We were talking last week about our grandgirls and going to a balloon festival. Well, our grandgirls are 3 and 1, and the 1-year-old doesn't talk a whole lot. The 3-year-old talks for her. And so we were on the way to the balloon festival, and we were explaining that mom and dad weren't coming with us. They were going out on a date. And the 3-year-old decided that the 1-year-old was saying that mom and dad didn't need to go out on a date, that they needed to come with us, that they wanted mom and dad. She was making the 1-year-old say this. And Jay and I just explained to her, no, it's really important that mom and dad have some time together. And as we were talking, the 3-year-old then says about the 1-year-old, Grandpa, she understands now that mom and dad need time. And so that was just funny. And I was like, she may not ever remember this, but if we keep putting that in her brain and in our conversation, that mom and dad needs some time for just mom and dad because they love each other. And, she grasped it as much as a 3-year-old could. I thought it was funny that she was blaming it on the 1-year-old. But they do need to know that mom and dad love each other and that they want to spend time together.
One of the saddest things I ever heard out of parents of teenagers, and I'm not trying to jump to teenagers right away because we're talking about that 5 to 18-year-old age. But I asked this couple, so when was the last time you were on a date? Oh, we date every Tuesday and Friday. I'm like, that's fantastic. What do? We go watch our son play basketball. Well, okay, that's not a date. That's a wonderful thing to do. Support your kid. I believe in that, but that's not a date. A date is, as defined by our friend in California, Oscar. He says a date is time spent where you can have conversation. Going to a movie, he says, is not a date. Dinner and a movie where you can have conversation at dinner is a date. But if you're going to date, it has to involve conversation. And I think that's critical, especially in regard to the fact that kids consume so much time we have to set aside time, and it's just like anything else. You have to make time. It's not just going to poof. Oh, we've got time. We can go. No, you got to go. Okay, Friday night, 7:00. We're going to get a babysitter, and we're going to go on a date.
And we said this last episode too about making sure that this relationship, the marriage relationship, stays a priority. As your children get older, they notice that more. They're not going to notice that so much at 4 and under. But now, as they're getting 5 and 6, they're having friends. They're going to friends' houses. They're seeing other moms and dads. They're seeing how they're beginning to become aware of how people interact together. They'll begin to notice what mom and dad are doing in their home and how mom and dad are interacting. And it becomes something that is very important and will mold them for later in their later relationships as they get older.
And, this battle for time, it really is not going to let up. It doesn't matter if you're 5, 8, 12, 18, the battle for time for mom and dad to feel, here's the struggle that I've observed. And I'm thankful for the fact that my kids were not involved in every possible travel sport known to man. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that my kids weren't into all those things. Certainly we had scheduling challenges and struggles, but they were probably more connected to my life than it was to the kids' lives. But now we're in this world where you can be made to feel like you're not a very good parent because you didn't say yes to this team, this recital, this practice, this travel opportunity. I have friends who spend tens of thousands of dollars, travel hockey, travel soccer, travel baseball, travels a hotel, there's a tournament, there's a 3-day, and the kids are exhausted, but they don't want to stop. I get it because they're with their friends. The parents are exhausted. They're a little irritated / bitter at having to spend all this money. And I asked one of them, a gentleman that I've become good friends with the last couple of years, I said, have you ever considered just telling your son to pick one instead of all 3? And he said he would never stand for it. And I thought, he would never stand for it. He's also not paying for it. He's not driving to it. He's not doing all the things. So I'd like to talk about the scheduling struggles that come with having kids that get a little bit older. And we're glad that they want to be involved in things. We're glad that they want to get immersed with their friend groups, their teams, and all of that. But if you don't set boundaries, I think that your marriage and your family long-term is going to suffer from over scheduling.
There's no question that's the biggest issue, one of the big issues that parents are facing now. And we know this firsthand because we travel for a living. And when we're out in Des Moines, Iowa for an ultimate date night, and we're staying at the Hampton Inn, and here's the traveling soccer or the traveling hockey, or we've got a dance competition, we've got a gym, you name it. The hotel is full of people. And we've got a personal friend who he has a job that can sustain their lifestyle very well, but she works just to pay for the traveling teams. It's the only reason she works. And I'm like, oh, wow, that just, and works all week, travels all weekend, comes back, lather, rinse, repeat.
And then what happens is if you have more than one child and they're both in, or 2 or
mom's
3,
going one way, dad's going
one way, dad's going the other, this child, there might be one that's not in any of that gets dragged along. And it's just not healthy for not only the marriage relationship, but it's not good for the family. And so we really tried to keep our kids in one activity a season or whatever however that worked. And
if you want to play football, you can't be in band.
Right.
I mean,
those
or vice versa. You want to be in band, you can't be in football.
Or if you're in dance isn't all your sport, then that's what we're going to do. And then they had to make choices. Our daughter was in dance until she was in 7th grade, and she had been swimming in the summer. And maybe it was even 5th or 6th grade. Then she started swimming more because swimming was what she really loved. She did dance because her friends did dance, but there came a point where we had to have, Grace, you got to choose one or the other because you can't do everything.
We don't have the time. You don't have the time.
Right. And she chose smart. She chose swim because that's what she was good at. And so trying to steer your kids towards, I mean, you can see as a parent, I remember when our daughter was in soccer. I mean, she was young, but she was more interested in the daisies in the ground than she was in kicking the ball.
No, the dandelions.
Whatever they were. She wasn't interested in kicking a ball. And it's been a joke her entire life that if it's a ball, she can't do it, but put her in the water and she'll take every one of us out. I mean, she is a state swimmer. She was a state swimmer. She was fantastic. And so steering them towards those things that they're good at. But again, you have to sit them down as they get to the, hey, mom, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. Well, you're going to choose one, and they're going to balk. They're going to roll their eyes. They're going to get mad. But again, it goes back to that. Who's in the driver's seat? Mom and dad have to be in the driver's seat. You have to be the adult that says, here's what you need to do. And that's really hard because everybody's doing it and every parent's doing it. And you're going to feel bad because the parents are going to go, why isn't Joey in this, that, and the other thing? Well, as a family, we've decided, and look at it this way. What might you be communicating to these other families and these other moms and dads that are probably just as desperate? I wish we weren't having to do all this. Well, if you set the trend, maybe somebody else will feel free to do that too.
We just had a conversation recently with a friend who did it right. His son was very into theater, and he said that made sense. He said, because when I was young and still am very into theater, I love doing plays. I love acting, even though I'm not a professional, all this kind of stuff. He said his son, between his junior and senior year, came to him and said, Dad, I want to do summer theater. And Dad and Mom came together and said, that's great. Tell us about it. Well, there's 3 productions, one in June, one in July, one in August. I want to do all 3. And what they did right was they had a conversation with the child. Okay, the kid's a junior in high school, and the conversation they had was, okay, son, if you were to do all 3, here's what summer's going to look like. We're not going to get to go to the lake on the weekends. We're not going to get to go on vacation to go see, grandma and grandpa, whatever. And you are going to be consumed 24/7 for 3 months, the entirety of summer, with these plays. However, if you choose one and you do it very, very well, you put your all into it, then guess what? We're going to have nights where we go get ice cream. We're going to have nights when we go to the beach, after work, or we're going to get to go on that family vacation. Do you see the difference? And he said, my son was like, wow, I never had thought about that. And understandably, what 17-year-old is going to think all that through? And so as parents, we can guide our kids without telling our kids, this is what you're going to do. Have a discussion with them, have a conversation, and allow them to cognitively come to the conclusion that makes the most sense.
And even when they're young, when they're in that 6, 7, 8, and they're just exploring what it is that I enjoy. Do I like soccer? Do I like baseball? Do I like football? Do I like dance? Do I like gymnastics? Guiding them as a parent, and just, if they have this season, these 3 months, we're going to try gymnastics. And then if you like it, we can continue. But if you want to switch to something else, then we'll switch to something else. As the parent, you guide them towards those activities rather than just signing them up for everything, because they might be interested in all of it, but let's not sign them up for everything.
Yeah. And I think the good news is that your kids, again, we're talking this week to the audience of 5-year-olds and over. I really think to some degree, kids are more capable of having a thoughtful discussion than we might give them credit for. I'm not trying to insinuate that a 5-year-old's ready to pick out his favorite college, but I would say that if you could kind of put it in terms of a value proposition, that is, listen, I know you really want to do this, or I know you really want this. So here's how we're going to together move forward and figure out how this is going to go. If it's the bike that you want, here's the jobs you need to do around the house to earn some of that money. Or if it's the thing that everybody else has, let's talk about why we just don't think that's the best thing for you. And for a while, you'll probably feel like, and maybe even hear from that child, that you're the lamest, most
Oh,
uncool,
no, worst.
worst, lamest, most uncool parent on the planet. But the reality is that if that child sees that you're acting in their best interest and that you still care about them, you're still going to take time for them. It doesn't mean the end of all pleasure and enjoyment. It means that you still have family time. A few weeks ago on this podcast, I shared a conversation with a gentleman named Joey Odom, who is an expert in reclaiming our lives from the technological side of things where devices have taken over.
Go listen to that podcast.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And one of the things that he said that has really stuck with me is that your child will so highly value the awkward moments and the awkward decisions that they think are awkward at the time, that down the road, they finally see the value of. And sometimes that just means that you said no. You said it lovingly. You didn't scream at them. You didn't throw a book at them. You just said, we're just not going to do it that way because I want us to have time together. And when that kid looks around at school and realizes how few of his or her friends have family time, they're going to notice a difference.
Yep. It's without saying that the difficult road to travel becomes the best road to travel. And yes, you're going to get the eye rolls. You're going to get the dad, mom. You're going to get all that because that's part of what you signed up for. You know, even if you're not trying to direct your kids, but as you direct your kids, there's going to be pushback because they're looking for boundaries. And when you create those boundaries, and they're what I would call gentle boundaries, they're not, barbed wire and electric fence boundaries, but it's like, this is really where we need to be on this. They're going to appreciate that and they're going to respect that. And they may not always like it, but like you say, as they reflect down the road, they're going to realize. It's funny because in our job, we traveled a ton. And we would constantly, every 3 to 6 months, we would ask our kids, is our job making you feel like you don't have folks at home? And they were like, no, my parents live close. My sister lives close. They were like, we've got family close. And, what you guys do allows us to do things that no other kids can do. I mean, we were able to take them places that, no other children were able to go. And so to understand that your circumstances are unique, but within that uniqueness, you still have to have those boundaries that allow you to parent well, because maybe someone who's listening has a husband or a wife that's a truck driver and is gone for a week or two at a time, or is a firefighter that's on 48-hour shift and isn't home for 48. I mean, all these are different scenarios, but you don't have to compromise your parenting style because of that.
Right. And we're not saying don't let your kids be involved in extracurricular activities. I think they're hugely important. I think sports is a great way to teach kids discipline, teamwork, all of that stuff. And I wanted our kids to be involved in sports and in everything that they could do. Jay probably wanted them to be involved in music more than either one of them were. But our son is very musical, and so is our daughter. And so directing them, giving them guidance is what you were put on this earth. It's why God gave you kids, was to guide them. And as the adult, you have to guide them. And what happens in the danger is that you let your kids rule the roost. That's what my mom used to call it. Ruling the roost. Don't let them rule the roost. I'm not gonna let you kids rule the roost. And and she didn't let us rule the roost. She ruled the roost. And that's, as a parent, we don't want to use maybe that language these days, but you have to be the adult and you have to be in the driver's seat, and you've got the boundaries, that's why it's so important. Again, we come back to this marital relationship. You and your spouse have to be on the same page so that you can guide your kids together. And one of you doesn't become the driver and the other one just sits in the back seat and waits for the shoe to drop, so to speak.
Let's talk about that same page for a moment, because now you're getting into the age of young people who can negotiate, who can argue, who have formulated their own opinions, and who have now learned that if they can just kind of keep mom and dad in separate rooms, they can make the request of one. And if the answer comes back less than a satisfactory manner, like, I don't think so. We're not going to do that. If, as long as this child, this devious child, has orchestrated this properly, he or she can then go and ask the other parent and never even let on to the fact that dad already said no.
Right.
So
Oh, and they all do it, don't they? Every last one of them
I
do
did
it.
it. I did it. I
Yeah.
was pretty good at it. And, because dad would be at my dad had 4 dealerships. So he would be at the dealerships. And if I would, if he say no to something, I'd kind of come home and be like, hey, mom, what do you think about this? And my mom's very wise. And so she would say, well, perhaps we should ask your father. And I would say, oh, no. He's so busy. He's just so busy, not wanting to give up the fact that he already said no. But let's talk to those married couples about having their policies in place as if it was an HR manual about how they're going to handle those things.
When our kids were young, we didn't always do it perfectly, but we tried really hard. And especially because when our kids were in this early school age, that elementary age, Jay was traveling a lot more than both of us were traveling, which happened later on as our kids got older, but he was traveling more. And so when they would try and do that, there was 2 different situations. If the kids were gone for the week, if Jay was gone for the weekend and one of them asked if they could go spend the night here or there, those kinds of things, I said, yes. But hey, can I be involved in this? And can I be involved in that? I would always say, you know what? When your dad gets home, he and I will have a conversation about it and we'll let you know. And that was when they were younger. Then as they got older, it was when your dad gets home, or let mom and dad have a conversation and we'll talk to you. And then we can all 3 sit down for a conversation. Keep that united front, because once they see that they can get between the 2 of you, that's what they're going to do. And so we'll be using that. Let's talk about this, all 3 of us, like your mom did. That was perfect.
Right. And one of the things to really, we want to warn against is don't make one parent the hammer and one parent the feather. You've got because the whole just wait till it goes both ways. Just wait till your mom gets home, or just wait till your dad gets home. Well, no, your mom and I need to discuss that. I appreciate you asking, and we'll talk about it. And mom and I'll come back and we'll give you our answer, instead of oh, mom's going to make this decision. That's unfair to both the child and to your spouse.
Well, and going back to kids are able to understand. We were talking about that a little bit more. They're able, especially as they get older. I would say 8 and up, you can have a conversation and tell them why this is what we're thinking. This is what we're wanting to do. Why don't you tell us why you're wanting to do this? And we're telling you no. Let's have a conversation, because sometimes they might have a really good reason that you haven't even thought about. Kids are smart. They're, let's not think that they don't have a brain and that they can't think for themselves and have a reason for why they're wanting to do what they're wanting to do. But remaining, on the same page, the 2 of you, that if they do come up with hey, this is, dad and I need to talk about that and we'll get back to you. But having the conversation, not just being the dictator as mom and dad, but having a conversation with them and hearing why they want to do what they want to do and what their reasons are, will also help them down the road as they grow older to be able to explain in different ways, shapes, and forms in their life of what they're wanting to do.
I'll give you a perfect example of that. Again, our kids are 7 years apart. Our daughter was the younger, and she always wanted a dog. Well, Laura and I traveled all the time, so there was no way we were going to have an animal in the house. And oftentimes Grace would travel with us. If we were going away for a weekend and she could go with us, we would take her with us, and she got to go to some great places. So when she asked for a dog, I said, okay, Grace, do me a favor. And for the next 2 weeks, I want you, instead of getting up at 7 to get ready for school, I want to ask you to get up at 6:30, and I want you to walk around the neighborhood one time. And then if you can do that for 2 weeks, we'll talk about getting a dog.
Oh, like a phantom walk.
Yeah, exactly. Because someone's got to walk the dog at first thing in the morning. Well, she didn't make it one morning. She set her alarm. She's like, forget this. But then she came back and she said, Mom, Dad, I've done some research, and guinea pigs, they self-regulate their eating, and they can be trained to use like kitty litter, so they don't have to be let out. And so on the weekends when we're gone, I could make sure that they've got enough food and enough litter so that they can be, and we're like, you know what, Grace, we're going to let you get a guinea pig because you've thought it out. It works in our lifestyle.
She presented a very good argument.
And I think that was a huge step in our relationship there. Unfortunately, they're called guinea pigs for a reason. The average guinea pig has a lifespan of like 6 months, and so
And that was traumatic. When the guinea pig died, it
when
was
Carmel
traumatic.
died, it was the day was Carmel. Her name was Carmel because she was caramel colored coat. Well, oh my goodness,
It was traumatic for all of us.
It was traumatic for all of us. But Grace was like, I could never have this. Just die. But nonetheless, let them come up with a scheme. And a scheme's not a bad word, or not a good word, but a plan.
Listening to their reasoning, listening to their plans,
And
especially as they get older.
Yeah, but you've both taken away the phrase that every young father has dreamed of dropping on every situation. Because I'm your father, and I said so, right? I mean, what's all this negotiating stuff? I wanted to drop the hammer. It's the one. It's funny. It's funny. You talk about how mature or how cognitive development works. And I remember when our son Bo was, I don't know, 6 or 7, his goldfish, his first ever pet, died. And Ellen and I both thought this was going to be the after school special moment where we would have this heartwarming talk about death and passing and grief. So I had a golf ball box, and we put the goldfish in a baggie in the golf ball box. We walked out. We had a pretty big backyard. We walked all the way back out to the very back of the yard, and we're standing out there around this little hole, and I put the box in the hole. I say, okay, Bo, I'm expecting this to be a very poignant moment that we would talk about for the rest of our lives. And I go, is there anything that you'd like to say in this moment? And he goes, bye, fish. Turned around and walked away. I was like, no, I was setting this up. I mean, I almost hired violinists to come out and be part of this special moment. And he was just done. He was ready to move on and go get whatever the next pet was. But the ability to communicate with your kids and to maybe even learn that they're a little more capable than you thought they were of handling difficulty. Now, difficulty could be defined as, no, you can't go to your friend's house Friday because Saturday we have things to do, or whatever. The definition of difficulty, of course, adds a little bit of flair to it all because some are more dramatic than others. But my point being that we sometimes, I think, underestimate the ability of our kids to have conversations, maybe because when we were that age, we didn't have them.
Right.
I think one of the conversations that I'll kind of turn a corner here, because yes, whether it's boundaries or habits or other things, I think one of the big conversations that continually has to be addressed is friends.
Yeah.
Who are you hanging out with, and what influence are they having on your life? My dad, he always told me, Jay, you'll become the people you hang out with and the books you read. So be careful in choosing both. And I think that we, that was my dad's advice when I was in my 20s and 30s, not when I was 15, because I wouldn't have understood it at 15. No, this is just my friend. But I'm not talking about manipulating your children, but set your kids up to have success in the friend department. In other words, probably don't take them with you to the bar and hook up with, Jimmy and his daddy at the bar. I'll never forget. We were with, I had the privilege of taking my son and 2 of his friends to an MSU football game. And we got given the tickets. It was a wonderful night. MSU won. And after the game, we're looking for a place to eat. And we drove by a Hooters. Now, I didn't even cross my mind, or no, we're not stopping there. And one of my son's friends said, well, let's go to Hooters. And the rest of us just started laughing. He said, come on, it's a family restaurant. My dad takes me there all the time.
Oh, no.
And I'm just like, okay, All right. Dude, we love you. We really do. And honestly, he's probably one of my son's closest friends now, but he now knows Jesus. So he understands these things. But to really help your kids see the choices that their friends are making. We're not condemning any friend. These are people. We love them as human beings. God calls us to love them. But if they're making poor choices, chances are you will too, if you're hanging around with them.
But again, you have to start those conversations early, being able to talk to them about everything and allowing them to have input as they get older and start making those friend choices that maybe you're not too happy with. If you haven't started having those conversations when they were 7, 8, and 9, they're not going to listen to you when they're 15, 16, and 17, because you're going to come at it differently. And so really giving your kids credit for being able to have conversations with them, even though they might be small reasons to have those conversations when they're 6, 7, 8, and 9, will set you up for success as they get older into their teen years.
Well, and if my wife was sitting here, she would add to that by saying, as best you can, make your house the place they all go. Become the gathering point for your kids' friends, whether it's the big game or whether it's the sleepover or the whatever. It cuts down on you having to nervously ponder permission for them to go to somebody else's house, because that's just a scary thing in many cases. But B, it gives you, even if you're upstairs while they're downstairs, unless you live in some place that's 7,000 square feet, you're going to overhear, and you're going to be a firsthand ear witness, maybe eyewitness to the relationships that your kids are choosing. And we just had a very, very cool reminder of that when our son was married at the end of August, because of all the guys that stood up in his wedding. Most all of them were frequent visitors to our home. And we were so honored and touched to watch as each of them came down the aisle, to go up on the stage. When they got to the front, instead of just walking past the groom, each one of them stopped, gave him a hug, whispered something in his ear. I don't know how appropriate it was, but it looked pretty good.
Who cares at that point?
Their places up there. And throughout the rest of that evening, the reception and all of those conversations that I had with them, that my wife had with them, they were so gracious and they were such sincere friends. And I think it largely took its roots because they could gather here at any time. And that started back like in junior high. That started in the 8, 9, 10-year-old range. And then those friends continued on for so long.
And the only change that mom and dad have to make is to increase the food budget.
That's it. That's
I mean, seriously.
If I need to buy a couple more pizzas, I can do that, because I know that in my house, I know that my standards will be honored.
Exactly.
And I know I could make all those boys afraid of me if I needed to, but I never really needed to. And that was the pretty cool part of it. So for whatever it's worth, I strongly recommend becoming the hub. Your kids are super busy.
Yeah.
So let's value the times when you can get them in the house. And if their friends want to come over too every once in a while, I think that's just wisdom. Along with also then marking out times that are just for your family. They are just your family times, and being able to, maybe it sounds corny, but maybe it's just being able to play some stupid games or just laugh instead of everybody going to their rooms and shutting the doors. Maybe you turn off the Wi-Fi for the night. And these are things I wish I had done better.
Do you want to know that one of the best investments we ever made? It's going to sound crazy. We bought a ping pong table. No one's on their phone while they're playing ping pong.
Right.
No one's trying to play Xbox while they're playing ping pong. And if you're the next one up, you're watching the game so that you can try and devise a strategy to beat the person that's going to win. I mean, it was amazing. And our kids, their friends would play it. I mean, you'd hear giggles from the 8-year-olds because they couldn't play it very well. You'd hear, you'd think the chandelier, not the chandeliers, but the lights were going to, fall out of the ceiling because the boys were going at it, playing ping pong upstairs. And, just simple things like that, or buy a game table or do something that is going to foster that. Hey, let's go to our, the LaFoons or the Hobsons. Let's go there because, we know we're going to get pizza and we know we're going to have Cokes and, just simple stuff like
and
that.
Ping pong's helped Jay and I now that we play pickleball.
That's
so,
right.
it worked out in the end.
Let's round this one out, much like we did last week, with just like 4 or 5 takeaways for the parents of those that are ages 5 up through 16 or 17. We'll deal with the high school, senior, college age kids in another episode. Yeah. Let's leave them with a few takeaways.
I think give your kids credit that they can have conversation with you. You don't have to dictate everything. Have a conversation with them and let them explain, let them give reasons, but communicate with them more than I'm mom, your child. Let's communicate like this.
When you're with your junior high student, realize, and I say this with all due respect, they're schizophrenic, because living inside of a junior high student is a complete child and a complete adult. And it's in junior high, those two are fighting. The child is still wanting to hang on, and that's why they'll cry over something simple, but the adult is wanting to come forward, and that's why they say these profound things that you like, oh my goodness, you're 12 and you just said that. And to just really give them grace as they're wrestling through that, because they're more confused than anyone about this whole battle that's going on inside of them. And err on the side of grace and just realize that they're not 21, that they're not 30, they're not fully developed yet, and that they really
and keep them,
they really are wonderful human beings.
Keep them in one activity at a time. That's hugely important, because it will affect, if your kids are involved in several different things at one time, especially if you have multiple children, it's going to affect your marriage. It's going to affect your children. It's going to affect your family. It's going to affect everything. So really keeping them in that one activity at a time.
And for those of our listeners that are faith-based, this is probably the best advice I can give you. Every afternoon at 2:26, my telephone alarm goes off. It's based on Proverbs 22:6. At 2:26, we stop whatever we're doing, even if we're in a high-level meeting. I just stop and I explain why my alarm went off. People are like, "Are you on heart medication? What's the matter?" No. I want to pray for every child that's represented in this room, and you would be surprised. No one's ever said, "Nah, not my kid. Don't pray for my kid." But we pray every day at 2:26 because of Proverbs 22:6 that says, "Train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it." Because you will have frightening times with your children where you're like, "Oh my goodness, what are they going through?" The Lord, and the Lord is the only one that you can turn to. There's not enough parenting advice on the planet to navigate some of these challenges that you're going to face. So start now, set that alarm, pause, and just even if you're at work and you can't take a long time, just breathe, "Lord, be with my kids." And just to start that.
That's good stuff. By the way, it's quite likely that many of you listening have some thoughts and comments, questions about all of this stuff. Let me encourage you to reach out. You can do so on our Facebook page. Please go and join the Marriage Talk Podcast Facebook page. You can also get to us through our website at marriagetalk.org. And in the podcast notes, you'll see our email address. And we'd love to hear from you and directly address the things that you wish had been discussed in these last several minutes. Clearly, we are not about to declare victory we've covered everything there is to do with parenting. It's all done in 2 episodes. So just know that there's more to come. Know that we will incorporate some experts and some best-selling authors and some nationally renowned speakers, and because we want to cover all the angles from all of this, but we also want to hear from you and respond directly to the questions you might have. So please reach out to us at Marriage Talk. And finally, I hope you'll share the link from this podcast with other parents in your world. There is strength in numbers, my friends, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversations in the days ahead. Thank you for listening. Jay and Laura, thanks much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.